Hello, hello. Welcome to another exciting live stream. Today, I'm coming at you from my childhood bedroom. Today we're talking about, I'll pull up my notes here, why Charlotte makes no sense as a U.S. city. And specifically, today we're going to unpack exactly how a city with no obvious reason to exist has gotten so big, particularly over the last 30 years. Plus, um, if you don't watch this video, you're going to miss out on why the location itself feels kind of random, how it became a banking giant nationally, the one old advantage that changed everything here, and why the city sprawls the way that it does, and whether any of this actually makes sense. We're gonna understand exactly why it came to exist, and also more importantly, um, whether or not Charlotte actually makes sense. And so, if you're live with me, drop it down in the chat. If you're not, drop it in the comments. And let's get into it. So, first up, we have a banking capital that shouldn't exist. Charlotte is the #2 banking capital in America, and there's no real good reason that it should be. So, let's talk about how big Charlotte is in banking, really, because while it is #2, just behind New York, and we have a ton of assets here. So Bank of America is headquartered here with $2.8 trillion in assets. Truist is also headquartered here with over $500 billion. We are only the 14th largest city with less than 1 million people inside of the actual city itself. And that has not stopped more and more people from deciding to make Charlotte home, most of all banks. And so to give an example of that, actually here recently, SMBC made an announcement about choosing Charlotte for putting more banking here.
North Carolina Governor Josh Stein has announced a multi-million-dollar banking investment in the city of Charlotte. The Japanese company Sumitomo Mitsui, or SMBC, plans to bring its second U.S. headquarters to the Queen City, bringing 2,000 jobs along with it and a more than $50 million investment. Governor Stein says the new partnership is just the right fit.
Every morning, more than 36,000 North Carolinians wake up and go to work at a Japanese-owned company. These talented workers are helping their companies to lead into the future.
The average salary for the new jobs will be well over $160,000 a year. You can hear more about the investment coming up on Your Side Tonight at 7:30.
So again, there's no real reason as to why Charlotte has become this huge banking hub. At least no obvious reason, because we're just don't get me wrong, I love Charlotte. There's so many things that I love about Charlotte, but in terms of banking, capital allocation, asset management, right? We're just a random mid-sized southern Sunbelt city that for whatever reason outmuscled a lot of other cities on the coast, inland, all over on one of these, again, very important, one of the most important industries is everybody in some way directly or indirectly uses and relies very heavily on banks. And so the weird story actually about how it turned to banking, the city turned to banking to really grow into this little oasis in the middle of the Carolinas, right? A lot of what Charlotte is today traces back to how we pulled that off several centuries ago. And so let's talk about the fact that there's no reason that there should even be a city here. So we have no rivers, no huge connected rivers. There's no ports. There's not really any huge reason to be here. And most of the great American cities grew up on some kind of water. Sure, we've got the Catawba River, but I mean, it's not like the Mississippi or something. It wasn't like this huge trading avenue, again, the way some of these other rivers were. And there's just not a lot of water here. It sits on this kind of ridge between the Catawba and the Yadkin watersheds. There's no really great navigable water. And so why is the city there at all? Charlotte was actually born out of where there were two different Native American trading paths that crossed, which now is Trade and Tryon Streets. And that crossroads was enough to turn into a village, that turned into a town, that turned into a small city, that turned into the behemoth that Charlotte is today. And the entire region has gone through so many different iterations over the centuries. But it all started with being this meeting point where two of the more important roads in the region made this natural trading hub. And actually, one of my favorite things about this too is it's not like Charlotte was just always somehow destined for greatness or anything. I'm going to find here, there's this old story actually from George Washington visiting Charlotte during the American Revolutionary War and commenting on it in his diary. And what he exactly said was, it was a trifling place. And for anybody that wants their vocab word of the day, define trifling. An adjective used to describe something unimportant, trivial, or of very little value. It can describe a person or other or their behavior as frivolous, shallow, lacking seriousness, of little value, or no matter of consequence. And so I find that very interesting because, there's an entire, this is from The Hornet's Nest, Book 1, Chapter 9, A Traveling Place. Let's see. The president, however, evidently was not particularly impressed with the county town of Mecklenburg. In his own diary of the Southern trip, he described Charlottetown as a trifling place. Interesting. James Polk, 11th president, was born in the present boundaries of Mecklenburg County, but where? Was it near Pineville or near Huntersville? Unpretentious monument purporting to mark the birthplace of Polk was put up in the site just south of Pineville, the cabin in which Samuel Polk and his wife Jane Knox lived. Substantial evidence can be presented to support the contention that Polk was not born in the Polk cabin, although he was taken there as an infant as soon as his mother was able to make the 30-mile journey from the Knox home, some 2.5 miles southwest of Huntersville. That's actually really interesting. Charlotte has always been a place of consequence, despite the poor judgment cast by George Washington. Physician, historian, native of the northern section of Mecklenburg, and his declare that Samuel Polk married. This is just really going in on that. Let's see if there's anything else interesting in here. With independence so boldly proclaimed in 1775, securely established by 1781, Mecklenburgers, never heard that term. Never heard that term before. Were free to contribute their energies to the peaceful pursuits of building a nation. The overthrow of British rule had been hardly noticeable in those 6 years of Mecklenburg's local government. The change had been in authority, not personalities. The same officials who had served under the king had continued to serve after Mecklenburg revolted. Interesting. Hardly more than a year after this decade began, for instance, tiny Charlottetown entertained the infant nation's first president at a gala picnic supper in the yard of Colonel Thomas Polk's home at the northeast corner of Trade and Tryon Streets. It was on a Saturday afternoon, 16 years after Tom Polk had read the Mecklenburg Declaration from the courthouse steps on May 28, 1791. General Washington arrived about 3 o'clock that afternoon to be greeted by the villagers and many other Mecklenburgers. I think that word is so funny. I really hope that we have a minor league baseball team called the Mecklenburgers at some point. That would be hilarious. Who had come in from, there's the Spartanburgers, which I think is also hilarious. Spartanburg, South Carolina, just an hour south. Anyways, or west, southwest, whatever. Who had come in from farms miles around. That Charlottetown was no pretentious place is plainly revealed in the diary kept by William Smith, a South Carolinian, 3 weeks before Washington's arrival, observed, and I quote, "Near Charlotte are some finely cultivated fields. This place does not deserve the name of a town because it consists only of a wretched courthouse and a few dwellings falling into decay. There's a good tavern kept by Mason where, however, I paid the dearest bill on the road." I think that's a pretty penny, but in old English. Anywho, so there were many people that made their opinion very, very known at the time that Charlotte was a completely unremarkable place, which makes it even more interesting that this little crossroad of Trade and Tryon Street, which actually I'll screen share that real quick. Let's look at the actual crossroad if you're not familiar. So in the very center, we have Trade and Tryon. And this is also now very important, but back in the day also very important because this was where that picnic with the president would have taken place shortly after we were finally truly free of British rule. Actually, I had a really funny comment from a gentleman that was British watching one of the videos talking about the street layout. And he was like, yeah, speaking as a British person, like, it's kind of crazy that Charlotte, like the streets, the layouts, like not that, like you say, it's weird. It doesn't look that weird. It, reminds me a lot of British cities. And I was like, technically speaking, Charlotte originally was a British city. On an unrelated note, happy 4th of July. Anyway, so yeah, it's crazy, especially to see like all these high rises and know the history that has taken place here. So, let's see, where were we? Yeah, so there's no reason that a city should even be here to begin with. No river, no port, no reason to be here. But because many of the other great American cities grew on water, but Charlotte grew on dirt crossroads. We had no harbor. And so what was Charlotte's version of a river or a port? Like, why were we still able to grow despite the fact that we didn't have Boston Harbor? We didn't have, like, Baltimore had that, Philadelphia, all the major cities on the East Coast, New York, right? Miami, like all the major cities of the day and of today, many of them all have those ports because that was how everything really got. It was the choke point, right, where all the supplies and trade had to go through. And for Charlotte, we didn't really have one of those. There's no real navigable water between the Catawba and the Yadkin watersheds, which are on the two sides of Charlotte. I wonder if I can find a map of that. That would actually be kind of interesting. Let's see. The Yadkin watershed map, because I feel like this will be interesting just to see. This is a good one. Yeah, the PD River Basin. So it goes kind of by, let's see if we can get this bigger. Why is this not? Let me zoom in, damn it. Here we go. Yeah, so the watershed off to the east, there's no real water anywhere close by. You'd have to go all the way out to basically Winston-Salem, which especially back in the day was no joke. Like, that was a hike, right? Or you got to go west to the Catawba, which we're pretty close to the Catawba. It's not that far, but still, it doesn't explain why, like, you go down to Winya Bay, which this is actually interesting. Like Georgetown today, not much there. Really not much there, even though back in the day it would have been a very important strategic point because you would have again been able to navigate the water inland up the PD River and been able to get pretty far into, inland into the state. So why did the city grow here at all? Again, it sprung up where two Native American trading paths cross, which is now Trade and Tryon. Right here. I wonder what these statues are. I've noticed them, I've never really looked at them. Lots of high rises. That's the Bank of America building right there on some very historically important dirt, which I find fascinating. And because this used to be the crossroads for the two different Native American trading paths, being the crossroads ended up actually being enough for a city to spring up here because it became the meeting point where a lot of the region's trade just naturally decided to come to trade because, again, there's a lot more people that you would access by being at the crossroads between the two. Also, because we are not boxed in, at least relatively speaking, again, there still is the Catawba somewhat close by, but we're not boxed in the way some cities are. And so it means that there wasn't the same geographical constraints on the growth of the city because going outwards, right, you could go real far before you actually got to water. And in the other direction, you could go an unlimited distance before you hit water. And that's also one of the reasons why, again, cost-wise, Charlotte is still one of the cheaper cities to live in because we don't, again, let's look at a couple other example cities real quick. You go out to Norfolk, right? You're split by these rivers, you're split by, or you're boxed in by the bay, the harbor, the James River, and then Chesapeake Bay. You go up to Baltimore, very similar. You're boxed in on one side. Washington, again, it's a little bit more inland, a little bit more protected, which is good. You still got river access, but again, like the river interrupts the middle of the city. You go up to New York and you have especially Manhattan, you have this very, very dense, limited area. And so it gets very expensive and people go vertical. But you go to Charlotte and we never had that issue because we did not grow here because of the water. We grew here because of the trade that occurred despite there not being any major water here. And so we already had, some pretty good traffic in the region, but that crossroad, the crossroads started because of trade, but it stayed because of gold. And this is kind of what marks the very early beginning of Charlotte becoming a city of consequence for all things shmoney. So let's talk about Charlotte gold discovery nugget. There's a big old one, huge one, 17-pound nugget. 17 pounds. America's first gold rush was not in California. It was actually in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we are a little bit of a forgotten gold town because in 1799, very close to Charlotte, a 12-year-old boy found a 17-pound nugget of gold, which was the largest nugget ever found in the region and the largest east of the Mississippi. Was a 28-pound behemoth discovered at the same site. Let's do some math on this real quick. So, gold price per ounce today. Granted, it's up right now, but so it's okay, about $4,000. If we convert 17 pounds, 2 ounces. So 17 times 16, 272. 272 times 4. That is a $1.1 million doorstop nugget of gold, right? And then they discovered, what was it? Another 24 pound, I think. So we'll just say times 1.5. We'll say times or be divided by 17 times 24. $1.5 million nugget of gold. That's pretty nuts. And so, as a result of this gold rush, the U.S. federal government opened the first branch of the U.S. Federal Mint in 1837, and Charlotte was literally minting money a century before the banks became huge here. And so the money obsession isn't random. It's in a very real way part of the history, part of the underlying fabric here. And I want to see if I can find Charlotte gold. Let's see if we can read gold mined. Fever spreads. It's actually in Cabarrus County. A 28 pound enslaved man named Peter found a massive 28-pound nugget in 1803. Crazy. So what was 28 pounds? Let's do math. 28 times 16 ounces times 4K. $1.8 million nugget of gold. That's crazy. The family used it as a doorstop for years until a jeweler identified it as gold and bought it for $3.50. Let's see, the big rock. Gold mine was running dry. I hate this. I pay for this subscription too. But here we are. Quick, it's making me log in. Why is it not letting me log in? Come on. Here we go. Now it's going. All right. Gold mine was running dry, but a North Carolina man held on to hope when he visited 129 years ago. Jacob Shin's optimism was rewarded when he hit something hard while digging on April 9th, 1896. The big rock was later determined to be a 23-pound gold nugget, the last major find at Reed Gold Mine near Charlotte, historians said. So there's 100 years of gold. That's crazy. By the late 1800s, the mines had mostly been exhausted, and the prospectors who worked it hard departed for other places like Colorado, Alaska, and California. I think it would be wild to be going to Alaska in the, what would that be, the early 1800s? It'd be a crazy trip to make. So again, the obsession with money here in Charlotte, and money and assets, just wealth in general here, isn't random. It has been the underlying foundation of the place since the gold rush in 1799, or started in 1799. It wasn't that like finance arrived in Charlotte. It was, in a sense, it was born here. It was discovered here, and so the original mint was saved, the Federal Mint, and is now the Mint Museum, and the gold in our DNA is how a relatively poor rural state pulled off quite literally the impossible to become one of the biggest banking hubs in the U.S. and the world, the second largest in the U.S. And so how does a very average, a very unremarkable, again, to quote George Washington, a trifling place, manage to beat the coasts at banking and become such a powerhouse for global finance? And it was because of one specific loophole. And so branch banking gave us a head start. And what exactly gave Charlotte the edge? So as late as the late 70s, like 1978, 10 states banned branch banking and 35 restricted it, but North Carolina never did. So North Carolina banks were allowed to spread statewide for a century, and so many of them grew very, very large compared to other states. And so as a result, let's see, I'm trying to find. As a result, there were some small banks that grew very, very large and had lots and lots of branches and became state powerhouses, so that when we saw the national banking charters become a thing, there were already some pretty large banking organizations here that were positioned to just absolutely rip and take off and dominate. So let's see, when did banking charters become federal? Let's see, national banking charters. It was to cross state lines. The Regal-Neal Interstate Banking and Branching Efficiency Act of 1994. Here we go. I don't know why my computer's struggling. Here we go. McFadden Act strictly forbade national and state banks from opening branches outside their home states to prevent monopolistic tendencies. Douglas Amendment closed a loophole by forbidding bank holding companies from acquiring banks across state lines unless the host state specifically passed laws to allow it. For the first time since the National Bank Act of 1863, the Regal-Neal Act created a uniform nationwide framework for branch banking, revolutionizing consumer banking, allowing large national branch networks to emerge. Very interesting. And so specifically, one small bank took huge advantage of this, and that was Hugh McColl's North Carolina Nations Bank, NCNB, I believe. Let's see if we can get that. Which bought California's Bank America in 1998, took the name, kept the HQ in Charlotte, and became, here we go, North Carolina National Bank transformed from a regional North Carolina bank into the third largest bank in the U.S. He achieved this through an aggressive strategy of interstate acquisitions and major mergers. In 1991, merged with Atlanta-based CNS Sovereign to reflect its massive new multi-state footprint. McCall renamed the combined entity Nations Bank. Nations Bank Corporate Center opened as the company's signature skyscraper in Charlotte in 92. 98, acquired California-based banking giant Bank of America Corporation, national rebranding. While Nations Bank was the surviving company, McCall chose to take the name Bank of America. This move successfully established America's first coast-to-coast bank and also established Charlotte as one of the finance powerhouses in the U.S. And it's crazy because it's so recent. Like, I don't know. Maybe this is just because I'm, an internet kid. I was born in 98. Like, to me, the idea that you don't have a national bank is insane, or digital banks is kind of insane because I just grew up with it. But I also get that's not how things have always been. Oh, and I'm not, let's see. This is what I was looking at. Screen share there. So, bumped my camera. And so when you take this into consideration of like how there were these regulations that constricted banking and finance from expanding until very, very recently, Charlotte's success is a lot less dumb than it looks because the change in this, 100 plus, over a century of regulation turned what was unimportant but very boring business in a very boring place into a huge compounding advantage because the state was basically an incubator for these people that were in the industry and had the aspirations to build something very large in an industry of people that were very content to not. So the regional bank reverse swallowing the coastal giant is it's really cool. It's very unique, and also it's kind of crazy just thinking about how Charlotte, again, there's nothing really here compared to other cities that grew in more traditional ways. And so for a city this shrewd about money, the name is oddly sentimental. So let's talk about why Charlotte, the people of Charlotte, decided to name ourselves after the queen that, and king, but after the queen that America was rebelling against. So the Queen City actually honors the wife of the exact king that the colonists revolted against. So we are a town or a city that has a royal name, but a rebel heart. So Charlotte was named after Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, wife of King George III. And the county is also named for the homeland as well, hence Mecklenburgers. Anybody wants to open up a minor league baseball team by that name, I am happy to throw the first pitch. Won't be good, but I'll do it. Now, Charlotte very much is a rebel town to the heart. It celebrates the Mecklenburg Declaration of May 20th, 1775, but most historians think that document never existed. The date is still printed on the North Carolina state flag and seal, so it is very much sealed in our hearts regardless. And the myth did real work. So true or not, the Mech Deck gave Charlotte a fierce independent identity, and the actual Mecklenburg resolves from May 31st of 1775 were real anti-British resolutions. And actually there's a very good story about this. Why is Charlotte called the Hornets? Well, during the American Revolution, during the 1780 Battle of Charlotte, British General Lord Cornwallis encountered fierce local resistance and described the city as a hornet's nest of rebellion, and the city proudly embraced the nickname, leading local fans overwhelmingly select Hornets during the naming contest for our basketball team in the 80s. And let's look at this one here. Let me screen share. Charlotte's nicknamed the Hornet's Nest, and if you look around the city, it won't take you long to find landmarks and even the NBA team to commemorate it. The Mecklenburg County Seal and Charlotte-Mecklenburg police cars also feature images of a hornet's nest. But why? Well, while hornets are usually not aggressive, they will defend themselves when they feel threatened, and that's exactly what soldiers in Charlotte did during a Revolutionary War battle. The battle is what led a British officer, General Lord Cornwallis, to compare the area to the insect with a vicious sting. Hornet's Nest moniker came from the Battle of Charlotte in 1780, which marked the beginning of a turning point in the Southern campaign of the American Revolutionary War. From September 11th to 24th, Lord Cornwallis, a British Army officer, stationed his troops along Waxhaw Creek in South Carolina in preparation to invade North Carolina. On the other side of the state line, American soldiers readied themselves near present-day Old Providence Road under the leadership of Major General Jethro Sumner and Brigadier General William Davidson, which actually I'm really curious. Let's just see how many miles it is from Old Providence Road down to the state line. Old Providence. So that would have been from right here to about 7.5 miles. So it's about 7.5 miles. While many American soldiers withdrew north to Salisbury, Sumner ordered Colonel William Davie, who was eventually joined by Captain Joseph Graham and Major Joseph Dixon, to keep his men in Charlotte to protect the fleeing soldiers. On September 26th, Cornwallis and his men invaded Charlotte along present-day South Tryon Street and were eventually able to work their way into Center City after a long battle where Graham was severely wounded and left for dead. However, after 16 days, Cornwallis and his men were forced to retreat back to South Carolina. It was during this time that Cornwallis referred to Charlotte and Mecklenburg County as a hornet's nest of rebellion, which is how we earned the name, because we don't start stuff, but we sure as hell will finish it. And honestly, this is one of the things that I love about Charlotte that is also, you can see today in the people. Everybody in Charlotte, even the people that are relatively new, are very, very passionate about just about calling this place home, and very invested in local politics and local development in just the city itself, because everybody that calls the place home really is proud to call it home and wants to to have a hand in what it really becomes. So, however, some of the funny contradictions or ironic things about Charlotte go far beyond the name. So the most obvious one of those being what we call downtown is not downtown. Actually, Charlotte is one of the handful of cities in America where you actually go up to town. And so it's a little bit backwards, but at the center or city center of Charlotte is uptown and not downtown. And everybody wants to know why. Well, it sits on a ridge, and so from every direction you walk uphill to reach it. And there's some discussion about this, because some people are like, oh, well, back in the day people called it downtown, other people are like, no, we called it uptown. And so the city council formally proclaimed that the center is called Uptown on September 23rd of 1974. And so it's weird, but it's part of our history. And the name literally describes the topography, because you're going up the hill to town, up to town, uptown. And it gave the core a distinct identity that many downtowns across the U.S. don't have. But once you're actually up there, good luck finding your way around. And this is also one of the things everybody talks about. Our streets in Uptown don't make a whole lot of sense. Let me show you the map here. I gotta, how do I clear measurement, share screen. There we go. So this is one of the few areas in the city where you can see a real grid. You can see the rest of the city is just all over the place doing whatever it feels like. But in Uptown, it might be at a diagonal, but we got a grid. And it's kind of crazy because we are, again, a global level banking hub with some really weird roads. And so the entire city, especially if you zoom out, it looks a lot like a spider web, because many of the roads and paths, especially the important ones, were born out of trading paths just happening to cross. And so at some point they just paved over the paths and they became roads, and it kind of stuck. And so Uptown is one of the few places that has grids. There's little pockets and neighborhoods and things that have grids, but it's the only place that has that kind of true master plan, like city master plan grid. And it's tilted on the southwest and northeast axis along creeks, not the compass. And it is split into 4 wards. So I'll show you. First ward is to the, it doesn't really show it, it's to the east. It's here. And then it goes clockwise. So first ward, second ward, third ward, fourth ward. And even though it is a grid in Uptown, it is famously disorienting because road names change midway through. There's like the random curve around the Spectrum Center. Like roads cross over themselves depending on where you're at, and then you've got the 277 loop going around it. It's just crazy. And like when you understand the story of the history of Charlotte, it makes some sense, right? Because the streets are just tracing old trails and creeks, and a lot of the historic places are places that you can still go to, right? If you go to Trade and Tryon, again, there's just skyscrapers around it, but it still is, like, you can see the dirt where the city started, for pretty much. And it doesn't make sense at first, but there's a lot of character here because, again, you go out west, a lot of those cities are very new. You come out east, and there's a lot of deep, rich history, and especially in Charlotte, there's a lot of deep, rich history going back 3-4 centuries, which I think is really cool. Again, some of the stuff doesn't make sense, especially when you're looking at it today, and that is something you can see at more places than just in Uptown. So another one of those that we're going to talk about is the Charlotte Douglas International Airport. I made a video on this recently that I would highly recommend going and checking out. Let's see if we can hold that up real quick. Here we go. Why Charlotte is risking $4 billion on an airport. This unpacks everything that they're doing there, but the biggest thing to understand is Charlotte is actually the 6th busiest airport in the world by takeoffs and landings. So again, why Charlotte is risking $4 billion on an airport. Living in Charlotte team channel. But where's my map? There we go. 6th busiest airport in the world by takeoffs and landings, with 58.8 million passengers in 2024. 70% of those flights are just connecting, and American Airlines runs roughly 90% of the flights and uses Charlotte as its second largest hub in the U.S. And looking at just the U.S. as a whole, right? For airlines that want to serve a national audience, especially in the East Coast, like they need some sort of a centralized region to send out a lot of these regional flights for the East, Southeast. And so Delta uses Atlanta, American Airlines uses Charlotte. There's really not anywhere else that has the same proximity to the rest of the coast. And so, again, just because these two little trading paths happened to cross where they did, it made dirt really cheap. It made it to where there was a lot of space to expand, and it also made it the perfect place for this large airport hub that was able to help fuel the city's growth through the 20th and 21st centuries. There's over 1,400 daily flights, 179 nonstop destinations, and a network which gives us a network of accessibility, a network of, access by air that is so vast that any metro area of 2.5-3 million people could never fill or never demand that sort of access by itself. But it also, as a result, makes Charlotte absurdly easy to reach, which has made it, especially for businesses and corporations that have a lot of travel in them, it makes it a really good central hub because there's such great access. And also it's really easy to get talent to come here relative to other cities because we do have some pretty great amenities that are hard to find elsewhere. And believe it or not, one of the most common ways that people discover Charlotte and decide to check it out and move here is actually they just had a connecting flight, and thanks to American Airlines, sometimes not being able to stay on schedule. I've had that happen a couple of times. Maybe I'm just bitter. I was a Delta snob for many years, and now I've mellowed out. But there's so many instances of people that were just, they had a connecting flight here, maybe they had a few hour layover, whatever, maybe they had a flight delay, and then they got out of the airport, they explored the rest of the city for like a little bit, just a few minutes, few hours, what have you, and decided that this was a place they wanted to get to know better because it is a pretty cool spot. It's a really cool spot. And it's just one more reason why it's strange how much of a thriving hub Charlotte is, because there's really not much around it for hours. Because there's no other cities that are Charlotte size within 2.5 hours, or the rest of North and South Carolina is by far the largest city in North and South Carolina. Some people are like, well, what about Raleigh? Raleigh is like a fraction. The Raleigh-Durham Triangle is a fraction. It's like less than half the size of Charlotte, and it's growing quick, but it's not growing the way Charlotte is. The nearest true peer city is Atlanta, and I mean, you ask me, you ask a lot of people. The reason I moved to Charlotte is because it's not Atlanta. It's 4 hours away. The second nearest one would be, again, Raleigh, which is still 2.5 hours away, and it's just not. It's not Charlotte, man. It is substantially smaller. It is substantially more sprawled. And the only other towns that are close by, like Greenville, Spartanburg, Columbia, Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Statesville, Asheville, a lot of people have visited Asheville or visited Charleston. They are both growing quickly, but they are not Charlotte, not even remotely close. They're far, far smaller. And so in a strange way, just how isolated Charlotte is kind of the competitive advantage. It's kind of the moat that keeps it what it is, because anybody that wants to be in the city, near the city, has to go to the city. Because if you're not in Charlotte, where are you, really? At least out of the Carolinas. And so as a result, Charlotte has owned a ton of banking and flights, jobs, sports, ton of different industries, manufacturing, and distribution, again, it became this hub for so many different things where a lot of companies, I forget how many Fortune 500s are, how many Fortune 500 companies are headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. It's a ton. I forget how many. 8 Fortune 500 companies. Let's see. Fortune 1000, 19 Fortune 5000 companies. Let's see. Or maybe I'm thinking Inc. 5000. "53 of the fastest growing companies in the U.S. are in Charlotte, and then 19 of the Fortune 1000. We have a ton of large companies here, especially for the size of the city. And because it's the only place to be in this general region, it even more so, just more and more people have decided to come here as a result. And so it's kind of dominance and isolation almost. You know, there's not much else to compete against. But I mean, despite that, we're showing up on the national scoreboard too, and also on a lot of other scoreboards as well, which brings us to one of my favorite things about Charlotte. So we again, despite being a relatively small city, we do have a whole lineup of major league teams in Charlotte. So we have the Panthers since 1995, which is football, American football. For the NBA, for basketball, we've got the Hornets. We also have the FC Charlotte for soccer or football, depending on what you call it. And we also are the headquarter. We are the Mecca for NASCAR, and we have the NASCAR Hall of Fame here. So, actually, one fun fact, the Hornets did leave for New Orleans in 2002, but came back in 2004, and then they renamed, but they reclaimed the name in 2014. I mean, just looking at the map, if you like to go out and do things right, especially sports games, we also have the Charlotte Knights, which is AAA, I think it's AAA baseball. Charlotte Knights. Yeah, AAA affiliate of the Chicago White Sox. And then we also have the Charlotte, what is it? For hockey, I'm trying to remember. We have minor league hockey. Checkers. We have the Checkers. And if you like major league hockey, if you like the Stanley Cup, the Canes did win. The Hurricanes did win, which is, again, a team from Raleigh. That is the one thing Raleigh has that we don't, sadly. But we won the Stanley Cup this year, so I mean, if you're a hockey fan, you got to come to the Carolinas. There's nowhere else to be, at least this year. Many of the teams were, pretty big bet for the city, because especially when we got these, like, Charlotte was growing rapidly, but it was so tiny in the early 2000s, in the 90s or early 2000s. And so for it to become this, big sports city, it helped to recruit a lot of businesses, a lot of residents, a lot of talent here. But it was also something that it was a very ambitious move for the city to make, given the size at the time. Because just to put let's Charlotte population, let's see, in 1990, it was 395,000, and the entire metro had a population of 1.1 million. Versus now, just Charlotte's, about 1 million people. And the metro is about 2.9 million, as I recall. And so, again, we've always been a pretty ambitious city. See where I lost my place, my notes. We've already always been a pretty ambitious city. But we did throw away one thing that we cannot build or rebuild, unfortunately, because a city founded in the 1760s where the oldest uptown building is from 1867. There is a lot of history here that has not survived. Uptown is almost completely wiped clean of any building over 100 years old, which again, for a city that has such rich history, is kind of sad. Again, if we go to the very center of the city, Trade and Tryon, you can see pretty clearly there's no building that looks more than about 30 years old here, maybe. And I will say it's a very pretty city, very clean, very green. This is what it looks like pretty much year round. There's only a couple of months where there's not leaves on the trees. And we still have a lot of evergreen trees as well, to where we just always have some kind of tree canopy, which I love, because especially that combined with the temperate winters and how much sunshine we get is just the best thing. It's one of the reasons I decided to move to Charlotte, because I need my sunshine. I cannot live without a little bit of sunshine. I grew up in the Midwest in Indiana, and I was actually just at a wedding this past weekend talking to some people that live in Charlotte, that after I was talking to them, realized that I went to school with one of them. It took us both a few minutes to recognize each other. And I asked his parents, I was like, you guys love Purdue, Boiler Up, right? What, you guys talked about moving to Indiana. Why did you decide to move to Charlotte? And they said the same thing that I always say, which is Charlotte is clean, green, blue skies, sunny, breezy, beautiful weather year round. We have our off days like anywhere else, but we got a whole lot of on days. You go to the Midwest, it is gray, cold, slimy, wet, just not what you're looking for a solid 6 to 9 months out of the year. It's not great. Charlotte is phenomenal in that sense. But anyways, I digress. So Uptown has almost no buildings that are over 100 years old. And unfortunately, in a 30-year period, about a third of Charlotte's potential landmarks were either demolished or gutted. And we do have a landmark status here, but it doesn't really, does it really help? Somewhat. North Carolina law lets the commissioner only delay demolition a year. 2 buildings protected from the 1850s were leveled in 1988. And so the tear down, like the reflex or the path of progress, having this tendency to tear down some of these older buildings, has made it so that Charlotte can, again, continue to develop up like this compared to many other cities that are not able to do that. But the loss of history is something that a lot of people have begun to speak out against and mourn, because it's we're trying to protect what's left, because even though there's not a whole lot of it, it still is like what we have is really cool and really special, and we want to hold on to it as much as we can, even though there's a lot of these newer buildings that are also really cool and helping to drive the city forwards. And now the newest version of Charlotte actually is hitting its own limit, and that is talking about the boom that is starting to eat itself in some sense. So the affordability that has brought so many people into Charlotte is also quietly beginning to price Charlotte out. It was the deal that attracted a lot of people, and all the people coming in began to inflate that deal. And so I can show you a graph of this, but the median home value in just a few years, so we're talking 2019. Here, let me log in and screen share this real quick. But in 2019, it was $238K. So the median home price, so your average house, right, is just shy of 240. And then by 2024, it was 407K. Think about that, like how quickly that happened. So that's 1.5 times in a 5-year period. And here, let me pull up this chart right here, because it's really cool to be able to actually see it. Statistical analysis model. Okay, here we go. All logged in and screen share. There we go. So looking at the raw data going back 10 years, we'll say, you can see there's a pretty good hop during COVID, but you can also see the growth that Charlotte has been experiencing is not new. It is not COVID related, even though there was, that 1 or 2 years of jump. And it has continued to just chug along, which is insane. And I'm going to make my face disappear. Home price at this point. And so a lot of the locals are saying that we're full, no more people, like Charlotte's full, try South Carolina, South Carolina's full, try Florida. And this is, unfortunately, I'm a big believer. Everybody gets to pick their problems in life. You have 2 sets of problems you can choose between. You can be like Detroit and you can pay the price of failure. And shrinking and the city falling apart after the 50s when manufacturing was at its peak, or you can pay the price of long-term, stable, continued growth. And this is the price of winning. And it's also the price of us having very good paying jobs, like SMBC bringing the average salary, or not, it wasn't the average, I think it was the median salary for the like 3,000 jobs they're bringing is $160,000 per person. So there's a lot of money and a lot of great jobs that are coming to Charlotte, and you see that show up in other places like this, which honestly, compared to a lot of other metros that have seen similar prices just going up and up and up as well, even more than this, they've not seen their wages go up the way that Charlotte has. And so again, I believe everybody picks their problems, and if these are the problems we got to pick, there are some far worse problems that we could have that we are very blessed to not have. What else was I going to touch on? I was just going to say again, very steady demand. We haven't seen decline like many other metros across the U.S. have either. And actually, the suburb of Fort Mill, South Carolina, just 20 minutes from uptown. Everybody hears South Carolina, they think it's super far. It's not. I'm going to show you. It is the fastest growing place in the entire U.S. right now, which is crazy. I think that's pretty cool though. So from right there, that is the center of Charlotte. 485 is the loop around, and then the suburbs are just beyond that. Fort Mill is about 20 minutes from uptown down to Fort Mill. That is the fastest growing place in the entire U.S. And so, you look at all this. Again, there's many reasons why Charlotte has grown, very few of which you could predict. And so it's kind of crazy. It's like none of this adds up, but seeing it all added together is working better than anybody could have imagined. And, every reason that Charlotte shouldn't work has become the reason that it actually does. And if nothing about it makes sense, then why has Charlotte so consistently been one of the, if not the top place for growth, like the most people moving here and then choosing to stay here? Like you look at South Florida or you look at Texas, people move there, they move away. They have a very high fall through rate. Like Florida only added 800 retirees last year because so many people left. They had like 43,000 people move in, like 43,000 or 42,200 people move out, right? They only added 800 people, which is insane. Versus Charlotte, we added 20,731 people. We average 157 people a day moving here, many of which actually stick and actually stay. For many of the reasons that we talked about. Again, the downsides of being close to water are things that we don't have to worry about in terms of how expensive it makes things. We have cheap dirt. We have a lot of people that are very optimistic and very fiercely invested in the long-term success of the city, going all the way back to the Revolutionary War, which is why we are the hornet's nest, right? And so if you're thinking about moving, buying, or selling, what really matters when you're looking at the city and considering it, the affordability window is closing. Like, we are seeing that we're chugging up towards the national median. We're getting up to a cost point where we will no longer be the deal that we have been. And so, for a long-term investment, there still is a lot of opportunity here. And in terms of, like, if you're looking to really make Charlotte home, whether you're already here and looking to trade up, or whether you're moving here and just trying to explore the city, I would say really make sure that you know everything the city has to offer, even if you're from here, because this is one of the things I've seen. A lot of people that have lived here for the last 20 years, they knew what some of the suburbs or some of the neighborhoods or whatever looked like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, and they still picture that and think about it in their mind when they're making a decision on where to live. And that's, like, a lot of that's not what the city really looks like anymore. And so you need to make sure you're actually looking at the real state of real estate in today's market today in Charlotte, to know that you're considering all the options that you would, could, or should before you make a decision to actually choose where to live here. And I've had so many people ask me about what are the areas that would be best for them in their situation, and everybody's situation is different, so there's no way to, I try to make a lot of videos about it, but it's impossible to really make a video for everybody. So what I did instead was I made a quiz that works for everybody. What you can do is take the quiz, answer a few quick questions. It will tell you exactly what are a handful of areas to continue to research, and give you some lists of homes to look at in each of those areas. It's a great research tool that narrows it down based off of what you want to be close to, what's important to you, what in your lifestyle are the non-negotiables and things that make you really happy. Go take it. The whole quiz takes about 30 seconds to take. Super quick, super easy. You can scan the code right there, or you can also tap the link down below in the description. Either way, I love you. I appreciate you. Thanks for tuning in on this one. If you got questions or ideas, drop them down in the comments below. I always love to hear your perspective. And also get video ideas. I really do appreciate it. I read every comment, I respond. And my name's Lucas Roller, your favorite and trusted source for all things real estate in Charlotte, North Carolina. And as always, until next time, hope to show you around town.